It's good to see you again. And I read your article in the Jewish Independent, and you sent me a message. Maybe it's best for me to throw it over to you here. You sent me a text, and
Yeah.
yeah,
I think like I've been writing columns for a really long time, and there are columns that you have to write for, like, you have to write them. It's something you have to put out into the world. And you get really nervous, and you get people to read it, and you go like, I'm really nervous. Can you please, make sure I haven't put my foot in it or said something insensitive, or this is going to be controversial. And it's never ever the ones that you think it's going to be, like the ones that go crazy. Um it's just never those. Like, it's some of the most inconsequential, not inconsequential, because this article wasn't inconsequential. It was important, but like there are some articles that I write that are like very irreverent, humorous, light, and they just get like really get people's backs up. And this one I kind of thought was fairly innocuous and straightforward in terms of, for people that do care about social justice. And um
well, let's
We've lost
circle
their
back.
minds. Like, what the hell? Like, I can't even, like, it's bizarre. Like, I'm not even upset or angry. It's just like bizarre. Like, and it'll never cease to amaze me how much people can read an article that I've written, and just their takeaway is just not there. Like, it's just not what I've written or not what I've said. And um read a tone that isn't there. And yeah, it's like just bizarre, bizarre.
What do you think you wrote? Like, let's introduce the piece. What was it called? What was it about?
Oh my gosh, I can't even remember the title. I'll bring it up on the screen so I can reference it as I speak. But like, it
I've
was
got it
just
here.
about it was about how, I mean, I guess my driver for writing it, and what I thought it was about, I don't know, I still would argue that the column's about is like, yes, anti-Semitism is like horrific, and I've been talking about anti-Semitism in all my columns and, online and everywhere else. But that there are lots and lots of issues, and anti-Semitism isn't the only issue that we need to be worried about, um, and that we need to vote for candidates that aren't using anti-Semitism to get our votes, but that are actually good people and good candidates and have integrity and want to see improvements to all of our lives. Um, so yeah, like that was my whole kind of point in writing it.
Mhm. But the piece was called "We Must Vote on Whole Platforms as Australians, Not Just as Jews."
Yeah.
But you can understand how when somebody reads that, and like, I am not, you know me well enough to know that my angle here is not this, right? But you can understand that I might read that on a really bad day. No, actually, that's just lying. But I can understand how some people might read that and be like, she's telling me that I should not be voting on anti-Semitism in this election because she thinks that other things I should be prioritizing other things. How dare she tell me what to prioritize?
I mean, I guess I don't read it that way, and I certainly didn't intend it that way. I wasn't saying that, it should be the bottom of the barrel. I was saying that, if someone really, okay, like let me give you an example, right? If someone really, really, really cares about anti-Semitism, but they want to curtail my reproductive rights, I am both a Jew and a woman. I need to look at the whole picture, right? And that's not to say that I value one over the other. I value both my culture and my
You
biological.
have to choose. You have to
But
choose now.
I know, right? Like, but I mean, I think that it's possible to say, well, this person gets 100. This candidate, like, this is all hypothetical, right? So this candidate gets 10 out of 10 on anti-Semitism, but 1 out of 10 on reproductive justice, but this other candidate gets maybe 7 or 8 out of 10 on anti Semitism, but gets 7 or 8 or even 5 or 6 out of 10 on reproductive justice. Like, there's a balance to be had. There's nuance, there's discussion, there's, all of these things. And what I see is a lot of candidates out there using anti Semitism to kind of win point scoring, but on other issues, they're like a 0 out of 10. And I'm like, all I'm saying is, look at the whole picture. Like, make sure that the candidates that you're voting for actually care about more than one issue in order to win a certain sector of the community's votes. That's all I'm saying. There are lots and lots of really crucial issues. Like, if the planet continues to burn, anti-Semitism won't matter because we won't any of us exist. So, like,
They'll hate us and we'll be on fire.
like there's more than one issue. Like, I'm not, and like I said, I'm not saying you have to vote for an anti-Semite. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that you have to ignore anti-Semitism. Like, I would find it incredibly difficult, almost impossible to vote for the Greens, at the moment. I mean, I've said publicly I won't vote for the Greens until they acknowledge the damage that they've done in the past 2 years to social cohesion and the lack of balance and the lack of, and platforming of certain people. And, like, I do have massive problems with them. Equally, there are some politicians who've been absolutely hugely vocal on anti-Semitism, but are absolutely, no, I'm not going to say criminal. They're what's the right word to use? I mean, just heinous on Aboriginal issues. Like, it's not, we need to look at all of the different issues and perspectives. And I've actually I wrote a piece for The Guardian ages ago about how politicians are basically toddlers. And, and I have some friends who are politicians and I actually do adore them. But overall, I think, it takes a certain kind of personality to go into politics. And there are lots of promises that get made that don't get kept. And sometimes it's a question of picking the best of a bad bunch,
Mm-hmm. Look, you've said a lot, but I think there's so many things that have come up. I think like this is a very deeply philosophical issue. I think,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that it's always really easy to be highly reactive. Obviously, especially when you're like in fight or flight or survival mode, or some type of recent traumatic event puts you in a place where the protectors inside you, those faculties that need to protect you, say, absolutely not, I cannot entertain that, we're doing this because we need X, Y, or Z. So I get it, but I remember being in high school and I remember having this conversation with friends about who to vote for. And it's funny because we couldn't vote, but it started to become something in which people were talking about, 16, 17, 18. And I said something along the lines of, well, like, my parents reckon that they would be better off financially under a Liberal National coalition, but they vote Labor because they think that they speak more to their values. And my parents are they both at the time spent decades working in the public service. And my parents seem to suggest that, the voting in the ballot box, it had more to do with what you believe would be best for everybody as opposed to yourself. And I was actually really surprised when I had friends, and I'm not saying they were right or wrong, I actually don't know, I think it's an interesting philosophical question, when they were unanimously no, the point of democracy is that every single one of us does what's best for us, and then all of that is amalgamated. You know what I mean? So it's an amalgamation of the interests of individuals to spill out. And I think that how you view voting actually might determine the way in which somebody reads your piece, which I think is really interesting. Am I going in for me?
The number of people who, the number of people who've commented and said, oh, you're pro this party or you're pro that party. I've never been a member of any political party, and I have, I've been a swing voter my whole life. And I've had situations where I've sat in a seat where the candidate is a member of a party that I don't support at that point, at that time. Like, I would say that party has policies I don't like, but that particular candidate is a moderate, and I feel the party benefits from a moderate view, right? Like, and we have to have moderates in government, even in parties that we necessarily don't agree with, right? So, so there's lots of different, I definitely I'm not, in any way party loyal in that sense, but I am certainly a small L liberal, and I think that, um, I mean, I've got so much stuff going through my head at the moment. Like, I think, there's, I mean, so many things I want to say in response to what you just said, but like a few of my thoughts, my fleeting thoughts through my ADHD brain is like, firstly, I think we are all multifaceted individuals who have different parts of our lives. I'm a Jewish woman. I'm a woman. I work in the area of women's health. I am an advocate for women's in the space of women's health. I have Aboriginal children. I, have friends who are recent migrants. I have friends, I was a boat person. Like my family got off a boat, like it's there's I have lots of, and for that reason I'm very involved in refugee advocacy as well. Like I have a lot of different things that I'm interested in, and I think this idea that people are trying to put me into a binary based on their reading of a piece that they really haven't read in good faith, is like a little frustrating, but I guess that's the nature of politics. That's why we say, no politics at the Shabbos table, right? Like it's, um,
Who says that?
I think the people who don't want to have huge family rows at dinner and just want to catch up and without broigus, I guess. But I'm certainly not my family. I
Yeah,
think
I feel like that's an other people's parents thing to say.
yeah.
I mean,
Um,
my parents' take on Shabbat was mum was like, we should really do this. I think it would be good for us. And my dad would sit there being like, I'm not even Jewish. This makes no sense. So we didn't even get to the point where we could like set the terms, you
like
know?
I'm a journalist and both my parents are lawyers, so you can imagine how feisty our dinners are, which we love. We love debate and discussion. But there's also this idea that like um yeah, I mean you sort of touched on it, but like I was a business journalist for over 15 years. And there's definitely a misnomer that one party, out of the two-party system in Australia, which is, as we know, fragmenting at the moment, um, out of the two major parties, that one party is fiscally more responsible, right? Now, it depends what your idea of fiscal responsibility is. I lean more towards the idea that, we have to have things like social security that's fit for purpose, and uh, bulk billing that's fit for purpose, and all of these things. If your idea of fiscal responsibility is trickle down economics, well, we're not gonna end up on ideologically in the same space, right? I don't believe in trickle down economics. It just doesn't work. So you can talk about fiscal responsibility and fiscal skill in management. But I think there's a lot of misnomers and assumptions about what that looks like and how it works.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not. It's definitely not within my ballpark to start talking about the reasonableness or lack thereof of government debt. But from the limited amount of time I spent studying political economy, it kind of seemed like everyone, whether it's states or businesses or households with
Mm.
mortgages, go into debt in order uh, to grow, right, or to facilitate their own needs. So this idea that we might use debt as a measurement for a government's ability to take care of its people is kind of ironic. It actually is. Debt is an investment in your
Look,
ability
I
to take care
think
of people, to an
Australians,
extent, of course.
in terms of fiscal management, Australia's always been like very conservative. It's the reason that Australia weathered, like we have such tight and strong regulation. We have we weathered the global financial crisis in a lot of ways in a lot better than a lot of other people, a lot of other countries, I should say. Like we didn't see our banks falling over. We have a very very strong regulator in the financial regulator, and um, subprime mortgages and things like that just weren't. It didn't have the same domino effect here as it did in America, right? And other places. But um, the way that debt has been made a political football is kind of simplistic and lacking in understanding of the way economics works.
I mean, this is why I love China, because they're just like, this is what I mean. Sorry, I'm not. That's a terrible soundbite. China do a lot of things terribly, but they also. I love the way communists are the best capitalists. At the end of the day, they're just like, but that's like not actually real. So we can just like accumulate as much of it as possible, and then change the value of our own dollar. And
Well, there are issues there as well. But, I guess with the nature of the discussion that I've watched around that piece and it being sort of like it's Labor's fault that I'm struggling financially, it's like, well, unless you're assuming that Labor's done so much financial damage in one term that they're the cause of your pain, or that you don't understand the way that Labor is attempting to strengthen things that the Liberals have, ignored. It's a pretty simplistic take. But that's the general population isn't necessarily going to be versed in either the political system or um, economics, and
I
fiscal
mean,
measures. So,
yeah,
um,
I mean, this speaks to like a general problem, right? I mean, we could argue that, perhaps some people lack the access to information necessary in order to understand that obviously, and this is not like a gleaming endorsement of voting for
mm,
Labor
mm,
or
mm.
against Liberal or whatever, but like I think it's really obvious that anyone who wants to blame Labor for like the Coles Woolworths duopoly price
Mm.
gouging them is not really reading the situation accurately. And so we could argue that's an inability to access good information. You could say maybe they've been fed in false information or disinformation or misinformation by particular organizations, blah blah blah. But for me, it seems like it might be something quite different. That this really isn't an access to information issue. This is a critical thinking issue, and we teach information gathering
In the Jewish
um,
community or more broad, like just
broadly,
general? Yeah.
broadly, and in the Jewish community. But I said it because I want to bring it back to the Jewish community.
Mm.
I think that maybe this speaks to my own arrogance, but I really felt differently about. I had this like idea in my head that the Jewish people of Australia were like highly educated, thoughtful, loved a good debate, and I'd never experienced the Jewish community in crisis. So I'd never seen what really happens. And my interpretation of what's happened in the last couple of years is that we're actually no better or worse than general pop. There's no real difference. And we've spent a lot of time very upset about the general population's inability to critically think. We look at the general population's taking from, let's say, Al Jazeera
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
whatever, and we're like, "What? Are
And
you
propagate
serious? How
it.
could you be?"
Yeah. Well,
But
we're
then we
all
do the same
human.
thing in our own
No, no. We're all
shtetl.
human. Like we're all human, and I think that media literacy and the issues around media literacy and the lack thereof is an issue in or out of the Jewish community. And it's clearly not to do with intelligence, or education, more broadly, not media education, but like general education levels. Like media literacy is a total inability to see, um, you know, to be able to recognize what is news and what is propaganda, what is campaigning and what is coverage, all of these sorts of things. And yeah, it's an issue just in the Jewish community in the same way as it is more broadly. But I don't know, I guess there are aspects of the community in Melbourne that I've watched and been so proud of, and I can see certain elements of that going out the window, like social justice doesn't matter anymore. The only thing that matters is anti-Semitism, and I just find that very difficult from certain quarters, and it's not by any means everyone or anything like that, but it's sort of painful to watch because it's like you still live on stolen land. Aboriginal people are still dying, 10 to 15 years younger than everyone else. Aboriginal children are still being taken away from their parents. Like, none of those things have changed, right? So you can't just say, well, that's not an issue for me anymore living on stolen land because anti-Semitism. Like, no, there's room for more than one social justice issue, you know? Um,
Do you think, though, that, I mean, the parts of the Australian culture that mostly deal with those issues or speak on those issues,
mhm,
for lack of a better word, those who are interested in social justice in Australia
mhm,
seem to deviate on the issue of anti Semitism in a way that makes it feel to some of us like, well, they're going to handle all of the other issues, but they're going to neglect the one that matters to me.
mm,
And on top of that, I can't even talk to them about all of the stuff that we agree on anymore.
mm, mm.
And I'm not speaking necessarily as myself, but I think as a general rule, it is really difficult to engage with a lot of people on the left on the things that are really important to me, like anti Semitism,
Mm.
without kind of having. Does that make sense? It's hard to
No,
talk about the other
look,
issues.
the schism for Jews on the left is real, right? Those of us who sat on the left politically are feeling very, very wounded. And I've written about this and I've talked about it and I've posted on it. And, like, you know, the left is, we thought, a place of tolerance and a place of lived experience being centered and all of these things. And it all went out the window when it came to Jews. I get it, right? Like, I'm there. I'm with you. I've been there, done that, Um, but I really, really think that in all issues, it's the loudest, most extreme voices that get surfaced, get shared, get picked up by media. Um, and yes, there is an issue with anti-Semitism on the left. There absolutely is. I don't question that. There's also a serious issue with anti-Semitism on the right. Okay, so let's not pretend that that doesn't exist. I think the difference is for a lot of people, they'd forgotten that it exists at both ends of the spectrum, right? And to some degree all the way through, but it may be in lesser concentrations, right? So let's not pretend that there aren't elements of the extreme right that are hanging out with Nazis and doing all kinds of really dangerous stuff, right? So, but I think that if we can calm down the conversation and start having these conversations like this, well, not that you and I are at odds. We're, I think, more on the same page than we are not. Although, like all good Jews, we don't agree on everything. But I think that we would have more constructive conversations, and I think that we would find that it's not quite as bad as it feels when you're viewing everything through a social media or a traditional media lens. You know, um, so I think everyone kind of like I just think it. I guess in a like a in by way of a metaphor, analogy, I don't know, I always get the two confused, but by way of example, I'll say it like that. I went to a book event, because my husband's writing a book, and there was a quite high profile author who was there, and I had been on tour with this particular author when I released my book, and I saw them.
Which my sister's
And
reading, by the way. One of my
oh,
sisters.
amazing. Let me know what she thinks, if she likes it. If she doesn't like it, don't tell me anything. Um, so and I had my Star of David on, and I had actually offered my husband, like, do you want me to take it off? Because it was a literary event. Literary event tends to be quite left. And I said, this is your night. It's up to you, if you don't want me to kind of, and he was like, absolutely not. Of course you're leaving it on. And I was like, okay, like, that's fine. I just wanted to offer, like, I didn't want to make it about me in any way, shape or form. And so it was very visible. I was wearing sort of normally like a slightly lower cut top. And I walked up to this author. Now, this author there had been conversations in some of my crowds about the stuff that they were posting online. And it felt a bit imbalanced, nothing anti Semitic, but it just felt a bit imbalanced. And it just felt like, but where's anything about the hostages? And it was, people were just like very wary. Jewish friends that I had were very wary. And I walked up to this author and they looked at me and said, oh my God, Izzy, are you okay? I've been so worried about you. How are you? And just drew me into a hug. Right now, you know, real life is not social media. It's just not. And we need to start having these real conversations where we can actually process things with nuance and outside of the binaries and all of these things that have been so damaging in the last, 2 years. Um, and have a bit more critical thinking around us when we express views and when we engage. And I think that would go a long way, personally.
So if someone, I mean, how old's your oldest?
9.
Right. So let's say that one of the comments on your latest article was written by a 9-year old. And I'm not going to say any comment in particular because there's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
45 Jews in all of Australia. And so
yeah,
there's no
yeah.
way of identifying her without outing someone. But
Yeah.
they were all of a general metal, right? So how would you respond to a 9-year old's critique of what you said?
What's the critique? What's like,
I
what's
think I think the general critique was how dare you try to show us how to reprioritize
mm,
around anti-Semitism
mm,
when anti-Semitism is what matters the most to me.
And also, I guess the critique was also that I was lecturing people and telling them how to vote. Someone actually accused me of suppressing Jews' votes, but anyway, I
I
don't
heard you were doing that a lot
that
of that
work,
actually.
yeah, like
Yeah.
Zionist, machinations behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So I think that the way I would respond is that my job and the reason I'm asked to write columns is because people think I have something of value to add, right? People think that I have ideas that need to be discussed, not that need to be agree with, but that might need to be discussed, might need to be, um, you know, articulated in order to spark discussion. Um, I don't want everyone who reads any of my work to agree with everything. I want it to get them thinking outside of whatever box they sit in. And we all sit in our boxes. I absolutely sit in a box, right? I try to open the door and let things in and let things out, but ultimately we all sit in our own boxes. So, you know, I'm not telling people how to vote. I'm not telling I'm not suppressing people's votes, and I'm certainly not lecturing anyone. I'm doing my job, which is to give my perspective in the hope that it sparks conversation. Um, and also potentially that if there are people that do agree with me, that they know they're not alone and that they, you know, can say, "Oh wow, that's actually," and I think that one of the things that I do is I try to make one argument and make it very clearly and make it very simply. And often, what I find, especially with the last 2 years of doing stuff for TJI, the Jewish Independent, is that often people are so distressed and people are so emotional about these things, which like we all are. But I do try and keep it really simple and just one idea, very simple, and run, you know. And I think there are people who value um, having that kind of calm, rational way of working through an argument, whatever that argument is, that they can share with other people and say, I've been trying to tell you how I feel, but I've been so emotional and messed up. I haven't been able to sort of articulate it very well. Here's what I mean. And like with that piece that I wrote at the very start of all of this about the left and about how horrible it was to be a Jew on the left during that period, people were so grateful because they were like, now I can show my friends on the left how I'm feeling, because they didn't feel like they could even articulate it because the pain was so acute. Um, so I would say to people, like, this is just my opinion. That's why it's an opinion column, that you may or may not agree with. But if you don't agree with it, I hope maybe it gets you thinking about how we sit in our community, but also really importantly outside our community. And we have this long tradition and history of social justice, and we can't ignore um, other people's pain because we are also in pain. And I don't mean that, I mean, I guess I'm talking about the candidates that talk about anti-Semitism and raise it and run with it because it gives them social capital and it gives them political capital. But actually, they're for other communities, they are like really, really seriously damaging. Like, do we want that? Do I want to have safety at the expense of someone else's safety? I don't think I do. Actually, I really don't.
Well, that is if you buy that safety is actually on the table for you in the
Well, I mean,
first place. It's
look,
snake
no,
oil,
no, no. I
right?
mean, look, like that, absolutely, like 100%. Like there is no. That's why I said they're raising anti-Semitism because of political capital, because of social capital. Like I know for a fact that there were
Which generates anti-Semitism, by the way, right?
correct. So, because it's you're getting special treatment, all this sort of crap, exceptionalism crap. But like, you know,
Tentacles.
I know very senior people in the Jewish community who tried to reach out to some candidates who are now speaking almost exclusively on anti-Semitism, who are not Jewish, and those candidates, like they have not for years were not able to get into their offices. They just didn't want to talk to the Jewish community. They weren't interested. It was no interest. And now they're the poster kids for fighting anti-Semitism. And it doesn't feel great. It's like, well, hang on a sec. Like, these are people who didn't not have any interest in engaging with my community before. And now not only do they want to, speak to my community, they want to speak for my community. And they want
Why
to,
would
it just, it
sorry,
doesn't sit well at all.
but I just why would anyone court the Jewish community? I don't understand. There's like none of us where it doesn't matter how we vote, right? Does it? I don't think it really matters how we vote.
Think, how to
0.4% of the Australian population, they might be able to swing McNamara and Goldstein if they all vote the same way. If we were a hive mind, we might be able to swing 2 or 3 seats,
yeah.
maybe, but like there's actually no real practical reason. I mean, this is me being super conspiratorial and weird now, but I can't help but wonder if there actually is an anti-Semitic element to the courting of the Jewish vote. They're
Mm,
like, well, if I like sidle up to the rich Jews in Dover Heights, maybe one or two of the rich Jews might be able to help me out in some way
yeah,
or
I'll
other.
donate. I don't know. I mean, I like on the whole, the Jewish community has, like all communities, very wealthy people that donate to whatever, candidates, but they also have a large, impoverished section of the community as well, which isn't as highly visible. Um, I think that there is a large well, I don't know. Like I hate answering questions when it's something I really am not well versed in. It's not something I enjoy doing. My gut feeling is that Jews um are viewed as, contributors to Australia. I think they have been active in philanthropy, they've been active in social justice, they've been active in, all sorts of really important areas because, the vast majority of the Jewish community did come here post World War II. I mean, of course there were existing communities, but it got much bigger after World War II, and then after the fall of the Soviet Union as well. There was another sort of wave of Russian and Eastern European migration as well, and I think that Jews are seen as contributors to society, and I think Australians don't like extremism. Australians don't like hatred, and they don't like extremism, and yes, we are an inherently racist country, but I think the vast majority of Australians don't like hatred um, or extremism, and I think that's a big part of it. They want to be seen to be supporting this community that have been, you know, um, I don't know how they view us, but I don't want to put words in their mouths, but have contributed to Australian society in the way that the Jewish community has. And they were so grateful. That was the point I was going to make, was that the Jews were so grateful to come here and find safety and find community, that I think the community really has, like, that's part of the reason that we're so active in things like philanthropy and giving back and all of those things, because we are so grateful to be safe here.
Yeah. I'm going to close this off. No, I really appreciate you not just like making up some bullshit to try to answer the question.
Mm-mm.
Like that's actually really more helpful to be like, I'm not entirely sure, but so no, I
Yeah,
appreciate that,
I
and
mean, it's a
it's
gut,
something.
reaction, and I don't know if it's true.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I think I also think that there is a lot of understanding about what happened during the Holocaust and the fact that we are a traumatized, a trauma imbued community. And I think people do have some empathy for that, you know?
Mm. Yeah. No, I hope so. I hope it comes from a good place.
I hope so too. I hope so too.
Yeah.
But I don't know. And I, you know, I think that I think that like Labor was slow to act on anti-Semitism, and I think they were slow because there was sort of risk paralysis following the referendum. And I also think like risk aversion to the point of paralysis, but I also think that it was so inflamed and so, you know, the tempers were running so high. I think they didn't want to take a wrong step, and in doing so, they didn't do anything. It was, I mean, obviously they immediately condemned October 7, and they have said, you know, civilian. They did say civilian death needed to be as low as possible in the Gaza incursion. I think they could have been a little bit more forceful on that a little earlier than they did, or than they were. Sorry. Having said all of that, I think that you know, Dutton sort of stepped in to a bit of a vacuum, um, and tried to leverage that vacuum as much as he possibly could. Um, and I think, you know, Labor eventually stepped up to the plate, but unfortunately they did leave that vacuum for him to step into. But like, you know, the LNP like tried to, you know, that stuff that they did to Mark Dreyfus in Parliament was just, I don't know how they can, I don't know how they can sleep at night trying to censure or whatever they did. I can't like
That's disgusting.
it
It
was.
really is. But that we are, you know, I think that we've been a scarily easy group of people to um, manipulate, and also at the same time, given the experience that we've had in broader society, it
Mm.
makes perfect sense. Um, I yeah, look,
I mean,
yeah,
they actually have done it. They did it to Mark. I'm just trying to find the wording it was, but yeah, they tried to gag him. They tried to censure him on anti. But
they did,
yeah, they
didn't
did.
they?
Well,
They did.
I don't think they did. They attempted it. It doesn't matter. The fact that they attempted it is bad enough.
I'll have to look it up, but
But
yeah,
they did the same to Josh Burns. Like they did the same to Josh Burns and tried to, you know, say that he hadn't been strong enough. And it's like, I just, you know, are you really a friend of the Jewish community if you're going to go after Jewish members of parliament like that? Like it just was, it's just ugly. It's just ugly. And to me, it shows their, you know, cynicism on
well,
the issue.
it's opportunistic, and I think that you know the word opportunistic really speaks to your characterization of the having not given a crap about these Jewish voices beforehand, and now all of a sudden courting them. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to get your take on, well, responses to your piece, because I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that like I try to read like you've written for obviously like a lot longer than me, but we do both get feedback, and like I remember like 10 years ago when I first like read the comments, I was just like, oh my god, like why do they want to kill me?
I was
Um,
I was head of social media for the Herald Sun, so like there's not a lot that scares me around. You know, like I've seen it all.
yeah,
And the other thing is, I have a high profile Aboriginal journalist husband who gets racist, you know, death threats first thing in the morning. So like I think that my take on it is, I think that the people that scare me the most are the people who are like, you know, I don't understand why. No, that's not fair. Can I rephrase? I think the people, the different kinds of commenters scare me for different reasons. So the people who kind of go, "Oh, why? Like, why are we so anti-Trump? Like, he's doing such a good job, and like he's doing, you know," and I just go, "Oh my god, that's like absolutely terrifying." Like, you just, I don't understand how anyone can look at what Trump is doing in America now and think it's okay. I am sort of horrified. Um, and then you have, the people who say to me, you've confused the issues because you're talking about abortion rights and that's an American issue. We don't have that issue here. And it's like, did you not see the story in South Australia where they got like literally this close to curtailing abortion rights? Yeah. So
It changed the Queensland election outcome, did it
it
not?
did.
Conversations on reproductive rights only in
Like
the
they had to
last 12
shut that
months.
down really fast because people were like, whoa, 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 like when there was a suggestion. But Barnaby Joyce has been very open about the fact that he would pursue curtailed abortion rights if he was in government. So so this idea, like this is just absolute ignorance. Like that's just really embarrassingly uninformed junk. Okay. Um, and then you get the people who are just outright insane, who've commented, and said things that I literally just didn't say. Who to say things like you're trying to suppress the Jewish vote, and I'm like, sorry, what? Like I don't what? Like I don't understand how you think I'm going to do that. So or why my piece would be doing that. So they're all kind of scary for different reasons, but I definitely feel like there's more fear for some than others.
Mm. And
Again,
taking
fear from some of them just stems from the fact that they get a vote at all.
yeah. Look, I, let's tie this up on a note of radical empathy. Right? I can understand pretty much any response to your piece. If
Yeah,
I really think about it, I'm
yeah,
not sure like I can logically justify a lot of it, but emotionally, fuck. People have been put through the ringer in a way that we just didn't expect. And so when I read the comments on your piece, I actually felt really sad, to
yeah.
be
Me too.
honest.
Yeah,
I
I did.
just felt sad. And I know like we're kind of both like laughing and a little bit now and smiling about it because we have to, right? Look, we have to just come to peace with the absurdity of everything, and this being just another little piece of absurdity. But human to human, when I read those comments, I just saw a lot of that's really sad. And, people might have said things in those comments that I think are a little NQR, but I also do think it's the privilege and the responsibility of those of us who might not be suffering today
Mm.
to just be like, okay, you can suffer in my comment section.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that's going to stay there forever. And if you want to discuss it further, more than happy to or not.
So that's. I mean, I think that's the thing that when I had a boycott called against me for literally no reason.
For suppressing Jewish votes, was it
Oh,
for
I don't know.
that?
It was because I'd done X, Y, Z, which I hadn't,
No,
and
what was this? Can you explain? Do you feel
um,
comfortable explaining this?
I was accused of being in certain spaces and saying things that I had never been in those spaces. So I was like, what the hell? I think the assumption was that
Sorry, was this within the Jewish community or outside?
no, this was outside the Jewish community.
So people outside the Jewish community boycotted you for being
They,
in the
they
spaces.
tried to get an event that I did boycotted. They said no one should be going to this event because this genocidal Zionist maniac is speaking, and it was, and I put a post on my Instagram and I said, like, if you come to my account, because there were a lot of influencers that were trying to get this going, and I said, if you come to my Instagram because of this, like, just read this post first, right? And I explained that I hadn't been in any of these groups that I was accused of being in, that I have posted numerous stories with my opinion. Here is my opinion. Here are my posts. Here is my, my stories that, I had all the receipts, whatever. And I had 3 messages, and one was abuse and I deleted it or blocked them. And the other 2 were like angry but engaging. So they're like, how could you do this? How could you say this? I don't understand. And I wrote, well, thanks for messaging me. The reason that you don't understand is because I didn't say any of those things. And here's the evidence of that. Like, here's the thing, right? And the only thing I've done is be a publicly identifiable Jew. That's my entire crime. And they were like, oh, hey, thanks for responding. I get it now. And off they went. And and I I
Me too.
so I say that, the people who are commenting on that article often are the people who are the most triggered. And what I would say to those people if they were listening is, why are you so incredibly triggered by someone saying we can't forget that there's more than one issue on the table and we have to balance those issues? I didn't say we have to ignore anti-Semitism. I didn't say everyone should vote Green. I didn't say, uh, all I'm saying is it's not the only issue. We have to look at a body of work of a politician and say, like, is this just political posturing, or do you actually care about my community? Did you care about my community pre-October 7? Did you ever visit my community pre-October 7? These are just questions to ask. So I would say to them, yes, I clearly, like, we're all traumatized. We're all traumatized for all different reasons, whether we have family in Israel, whether we, have visited Palestine, whether we have, sit on the left and have watched our friends and family post heinously anti-Semitic material, all of these things, okay? Like, we're all traumatized or been abused for wearing a Star of David in the street, which I know many, many people who have been. Like, but equally, I say, why are you losing your mind over a fairly innocuous, uncontroversial to many people piece that is just advocating for, a broad vision of where we want to live and how we want the society to be, both in our community, but also importantly beyond it. We are 120,000 people in a country of 21 million, right? We have to look at the big picture as well. As I said, anti-Semitism is heinous and horrific, but also, climate change is going to kill us all. Like, let's just remember, we don't have to be binary. We can look at the big picture. So that's what I would say to them. And I would also say that most journalists, I really do feel like most journalists, especially columnists, they want engagement. Like, we want people to engage with us. We want to discuss. Like, someone who doesn't enjoy debate should not be writing columns, really, in my view. It's about how you engage. Not one of them asked me a question. Not one of them asked me a question. They just abused me. It's interesting. And I'm a big girl. I've got a thick skin. I can take it. It's totally fine. I'm not worried about it. It's just interesting to me. In this community, I think we could be listening a little more to each other. Because everyone's saying we're not homogenous. We're not a homogenous community. We're not all the same. We're different. There's different shades. There's different views. There's different politics, whatever. But then we're all kind of screaming at each other and not listening very well. So, that's sad. Could be better. Could be more constructive.
Thank you.
I hope that's helpful.
Me too. Me too. Honestly, I think it will be. I mean, we kept it under an hour, and I think there's plenty of like bits in there that like I'm excited to share with people.
But it's not. I mean, I don't think I said anything particularly controversial.
But it's not about what you. Okay, I had.
No, not that I got on here going, I'm going to say something really controversial, but I'm saying people will lose their minds again. But I don't think I said anything particularly controversial.
No, I mean, all the stuff you were talking about, putting the R words back in the asylums and forcing them to work before we started recording, that was controversial. To some. But no, look, we'll tie it up on this, right? Like, last night, my partner and I, she had some uni to finish. I thought she'd finished it. I was just taking my time dilly-daddling. We were talking about something that's like been quite emotionally stressful for both of us recently, just like a social thing.
Yeah.
And, as we were talking, as I was talking, and also all I was supposed to do in this entire time was fry her an egg and put it on toast. So that was the whole job. I didn't appreciate that she actually had like a limited amount of time and needed to get back upstairs to study. So I'm dilly daddling and dilly
If she
daddling.
cracked shits.
No, not even that. She's so patient. She just said, she came in, she was just like, is there anything I can do to speed things up? You know?
Need my
And
egg, man.
this feeling inside me was just so, I felt like so slighted. Like how, firstly, what we're discussing is really emotionally big, you know? And what are
Yeah,
you doing thinking? And also, like, you told me that you were finished with the uni stuff. So now I feel like a total idiot
yeah,
because I've
yeah.
just been blabbering and you've been waiting for me to finish.
It's the egg.
And, and I just felt really, for lack of a better word, like triggered. I just felt like really upset, and I was like, "That's so unfair." And then she said, "Well, what are you talking about? Like, I need to get back up and do uni." And I was like, "What are you talking about? I did not know that at all. I thought you finished it." It took like a solid couple of minutes for me to be like, "Huh." Like, so I actually like we could keep kind of arguing about this and the order of events and who's miscommunicated or whatever, but like the real issue here is that like I grew up with a mother who like is such a workaholic that like anything that involved an interaction with her was wedged in between her work.
Mm.
And so I always knew that like no matter what happened, she had to be in and out in 5 minutes. So
Yeah,
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 I'll come
yeah.
and be Supermum, but I've got to fuck off because I've got. And so something about that dynamic inside me turned what could have been, oh, okay, fair enough, into like actually a conversation that was far more heated than it needed to be.
Yeah.
And like, I think it is actually up to the person who is being triggered to have the faculties to be like, oh, fuck.
Oh, if
So,
only,
something's going on for me here that
if
is, I'm
only.
now causing harm. I'm
Yeah,
now shitty, which makes you shitty because I haven't stood back and go, oh my God, I'm putting my mum onto you, you
yeah, yeah.
know? Like, you know, and so when the people are in the comments are doing that, commenting the way that they comment, I would encourage them to be like, you know, firstly, like,
Why are you losing your shit about this? That's what I
you know,
said. What
yeah,
what about this piece has made you so, and like I said, you never know. It's funny how there are these pieces that, like, some of the pieces that I've written for the Jewish Independent, I have been shitting myself. I'm going to get cancelled. I'm going to get cancelled by the Jews. I'm going to get cancelled by the Palestinians. I'm going to get cancelled by Muslims. I'm going to get cancelled by everyone. And they just drop, and they're fairly, well received, or there's always debate, but the debate's civil and whatever. And I just thought that I did not expect that piece to be particularly controversial. I think the other thing I would say is, like, um, there's a certain perspective. I think, like, my privilege in being a mother to Aboriginal children and having connection to community. There are some very high profile Aboriginal activists who have reached out to me in the past. What is it? A year and a half. And have uh I guess encouraged me to lean on them in various ways as I try to navigate racism that I had never seen towards my community before. I mean, I have experienced anti-Semitism in many, many different parts of my life. I went to a non-Jewish boarding school. I walked into my room one day and there was a big sign above my bed that said Nazi legends rule. You know, I have experienced severe anti-Semitism at work. I've seen it all. Okay, like we all have. We all have. You can't. And I have also seen Aboriginal kids be criminalized, targeted. I've watched my husband with his friends not being able to get a taxi. I've watched judiciary treat Aboriginal people like shit just because they're Aboriginal in a courtroom. I have, we've had, Jack's cousin died in custody. We've had, Jack has been covering the J. Walker case for his book. I've watched family be harassed by police. I have been scared when I'm with my Aboriginal friends and family wearing an Aboriginal print t-shirt to be stopped by police with them. You know, I know people who've had their children taken off them for nothing. I have a friend who, when you have a little toddler, you put your kids in a bed for the first time, and what often happens is they tumble out, right? For the first time. That's why there are bed guards and all those things. And their toddler tumbled out of bed and had a bruise, and they had a debate for 12 hours about whether or not to take her to hospital because they thought she's going to get taken off us, right? If we take her to hospital. this is the reality of being Aboriginal in this country, right? I have people, saying to me like the stickers, the this, the that, the other, and obviously like these are all happening. I mean, I live in the hood, right? I live in the ghetto, so this is happening outside my house. I live right in the Jewish Museum. Like we're targeted. We've seen it all. My kids have heard it and seen it and asked me about it, and so I feel like it was a very humbling experience to have those people. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. Trying to support me through what I was going through when they see stuff that is worse. It's worse. It's worse. It's like it's everywhere and it's all the time and it's their whole lives. Like they haven't seen it spike. Well, they have seen it spike a post referendum, but like it can't spike much higher than it has been their whole lives. So, and actually, child removals are getting worse. Incarceration rates are getting worse. Deaths in custody still happening despite the Royal Commission. Like, and these are people who are reaching out to me and saying, "Are you okay? Can I do anything? This is appalling. I won't stand for it. I will stand with you publicly against this." And so, I think for someone to say to me, anti-Semitism is the only thing that I or my community care about right now, that's really hard for me to listen to when I have Aboriginal people saying this is also my problem, because like no one gives a shit about their problems most of the time. And so it's like, I mean, we do give a shit. I don't mean it like that. You know what I'm saying? I'm saying like, um, the lack of care among so many people about what happens in Aboriginal communities is infuriating. And yet they still are reaching out to me and saying, how can I support you? What can I do? Your problem is my problem. So for the Jewish community, for anyone in the Jewish community to be saying to me, I don't give a shit about anyone else's problems, this is the only thing I care about right now, that's hard. That's hard for me to process. That's hard. Like I don't know how to swallow that.
You don't have to.
Yeah. So, um, so yeah, like I think that I absolutely have written pieces where I've had really bad feedback and I've rethought and I've thought I didn't word that well, or I didn't express that the way that I wanted, or maybe I was wrong. Like maybe I didn't think that through and they're right and there was another angle I didn't consider or whatever, but this piece I stand by it 110%, and I hope there's just this tiny part of those people that it gets them thinking.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I got really emotional. That was hard. I haven't articulated that to anyone ever. So, yeah, I haven't even articulated that to Jack, I don't think.
You shouldn't be sorry. I mean,
No, no, I mean, I'm not sorry. Like, I don't know. I say sorry to it. I'm one of those apologizey people. I say sorry for like everything.
hmm,
But yeah, it's perspective is everything. Sectional disadvantage, which I don't experience in the same way as someone who's, for instance, Aboriginal and disabled and LGBTIQ plus and from marginalised communities, multiple marginalised communities. There are things that affect our view and our, like, that's what privilege does, right? It affects the way you see an issue and the way you process that issue. I just really hope that the community finds its way out of this period of like trauma that's affecting maybe people's judgment that wouldn't otherwise be quite so affected. Maybe, I don't know.
no, it's a. I was having a conversation earlier with a friend, and she was talking about how she'll probably. I actually spoke to her, and I said I'd be talking to you, and I described to her the who you are and what your work had been like, and I wanted her opinion because she's a further to the right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wouldn't call her right wing, but she's.
But yeah, yeah. No, I'm very left. I know I'm very
Yeah.
left. No,
Well,
I'm
I just
for a
I
lot
was
of, so yeah.
well, I just wanted her. I was like, what would you see here that I'm not seeing, right? Because I'm just not going to be able to see it as a right winger.
Yeah.
Neither she, but a bit closer. Anyway, the conversation ended up in a conversation about, knowing what people really think and how hard it is. And when it comes to voting for someone like Dutton over, say, Albanese, it may not even be a case of preferring Dutton. It may be a case of at least knowing what he really thinks, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that when it comes to good writing and good, I mean, I'm not a journalist, but when it comes to the good journalism that I read, and, you know, especially in regards to this conversation we've just had, it hits different when the person you're dealing with, their views are actually their views. That really means something. It's not a game. This isn't a rhetorical exercise for you. You're not sitting around being like, hold on, I'm going to play with like Jewish prioritization and see who bites. You know, this is serious.
Do you know what? Like, I think one of the most powerful moments for me now, so Josh Burns, who sits in the seat of McNamara, and we know that his seat is at a serious risk of losing his seat for a variety of reasons. Like when Senator Payman was talking in Parliament and said, you know, it's been horrible. I've been, you know, it's been awful being a Muslim, you know, senator, and she said the only person who has reached out to me is Josh Burns. Now, Josh is a friend of mine. No, we're not close, but we're certainly friends. And I was so proud at that moment. And because I was like, he didn't send an open letter. He didn't ask journalists to come to a door knock and watch him take a muffin basket. He did it because he cared, because he knows what it feels like to be othered in those spaces. And that's the difference. That's the difference, right? And the irony of this is that, I mean, they're looking at changes that are being made at the moment to allow the preferencing, like changes to the preferencing in this seat, so that, because what I don't actually know if it's gone through yet or if it's been approved, but up until now, the issue has been that the way the preferences work, it looked like the Greens were going to get the seat, right? And because the large Jewish community in this seat were going to vote for the Liberal candidate, right? That's the irony of the situation. And the lack of, you know, and preferences make things very complicated, and minor parties and all the rest of it. But yeah, like that's what I'm saying about looking at someone's whole, like what they've done, what they've actually done, how they've acted, work that they've put in, you know, and whether you share their values,
Hmm.
you know, like even if you don't agree, you're never going to agree with everything.
Hmm.
You know, you're never going to agree with every single thing, but it's almost like, you know, you've got to pick the closest that you can get, you
Hmm.
know, to where you're coming from. And like I said,
Yeah.
I voted for people that I don't agree with their party platforms, but this person's a moderate, and without them in the party room, that nothing's ever going to change. Nothing's ever going to shift. There'll be no other voice. I mean, the other thing is there's Teals as well. Some of the Teals have been so good in negotiation, and you know, Jackie Lambie is a really complicated character, but some of the stuff that she's negotiated, she is very complicated, and I certainly don't agree with her on a lot of stuff. But there have been things that she has done really, really well on. You know,
Yep. Yeah,
um,
well, this is just, but you know, we forget that the fucking politicians are humans, and like we all have a piece of shit inside of us,
yeah, yeah,
and we all have gold inside us, and
yeah, yeah.
politicians are no different. We just have to all pretend that there's no shit, you know, or if there is a little, if we find little shit, they're
Look,
all shit,
you
you
know,
know, and
Waleed Ali wrote a quarterly essay, which I read, and I didn't agree with. Like the bulk of it, I didn't agree with.
was it the
Yeah,
one with Scott Stevens?
yes, and I know you're a fan of Scott Stevens, but I did not like that quarterly essay personally. That's just my personal thing, but that's okay. It's still interesting. But he wrote a column recently, and I thought it was brilliant. And I texted him. I said, "Wally, this is such a good column. Like this is not just." Do I agree with it? But I said, actually, the structure and the way you prosecuted the argument, I mean, it's just an excellent column. Funny that I say prosecuted because he is actually a lawyer by background. But and I sent it to someone, and she said, I didn't like his column about blah, so I don't really read him anymore. And I'm like, okay, like I just find that odd. Like, you don't have to agree with everything I write to say this is a good column. Like, you can say I don't agree with this column and this is a good column. Like, anyway, it's just interesting. Again, binary. You either like the columnist or you don't. It's like, oh, I agree with some stuff, not others. How hard is that? You know?
Yeah, I don't like Radiohead's latest album, but I
There you
still think
go.
they're the best band of all time.
There you go. There.
Yeah, yeah, there's so many literary examples as well. But I can't think of anything I've read by Tim Winton I didn't like.
Mm-mm.
Um, except the open letters he signed. But he can't win them all.
All right. Um, Thanks for the time, and I hope everyone gets something out of it. It's always good to chat, even when I'm not in my pajamas.
You too. Thanks so much.